our last session of Leadership Day. So thank you all for hanging out with us and playing some trivia. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Emma, use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Community Engagement Director with Outright Vermont. And I'm really excited to have this next part, which is our Race of Leadership panel. We have 3 panelists joining us who I'm really excited for you all to meet. I know some of you might know them already. But how this is going to go is that Outright has some questions. We're going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. And then if there are some questions that you would like to ask our panelists, we're going to ask you to drop them in the chat. And we're going to try to get through as many as we can, but we're definitely going to try to find a balance between the questions that we have for them, but also the ones that you probably want to ask and get to know yourself. So I think without further ado, let's go ahead and meet our panelists. So I'm going to remove myself from the spotlight here. All right. So we have our 3 panelists. We have Amanda Wong, we have Stefan Gillum, and we have Alex Fisher. Y'all, thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us. I know that we are super excited to get to know you. And so we're just gonna dive right into this. So if you could, and I'll let you all decide the order of who goes first. I know that's always a thing, but if you could share your name, your pronouns, and then some of the salient identities that you hold. And then of course we have to ask you this, if you were a shoe, what kind of shoe would you be?
I can start. So hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Wong. My English pronouns are she, her, and hers. Some salient identities I hold. So in terms of social identities, I am a queer 2nd generation Chinese American woman. And I'm calling in from White River Junction today. And for folks who are aware, I also serve on the board of directors for Outright. If I were a shoe, what kind of shoe would I be? I think this is actually a tough one because I feel like there's so many options, particularly in Vermont, where it's like, oh, well, but I think because it's mud season, I'm gonna go with the pair of Blundstones and just the all leather, all out waterproof Chelsea boot.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. I'm just gonna jump myself in there. Hey everybody, hey Amanda, hey Alex, Fisher, and good to see you. It's been a long time. So my name is Stefan Gillum. My pronouns really are any, as long as they're spoken in love. It doesn't really bother me, but I usually am addressed as he, him, or them, they, but really any do work. Shoes, that is an interesting one. I'm coming to you from Brattleboro, Vermont, actually. So down here in Windham County. It just depends, like I think that my soul and my spirit would probably say like a nice pair of like maybe men's or women's, I don't know, depending on the day, like Manolo Blahnik with like a double stacked heel sort of situation. But then I also really do like Danskos as well. So I feel like that's like my personality. So somewhere in between there, depending on the day, that's I think what my shoe would be. And I think that's all we've got for this question, right? Or is there more to it? Okay. So I guess I'll pass it on to you then.
Sure. Did you want to answer any of the salient identity pieces, or you feel good?
I knew I forgot something. So, total me. So I identify as Black or mixed race and Black, because you can hold both identities, biracial and Black, queer, um, descendant of slaves, so descendant of slavery, and I would say I also identify somewhat as weirdly like kind of a Vermonter, but a person who is from the South. Um, and I have a lot of Southern heritage, and I think I really identify with that. Thanks for reminding me.
No problem. Absolutely. Hey, everybody. I'm Alex Fisher. Some people call me Alex. Some people call me Fisher. Some people call me Alex Fisher. Any of those are great. I feel lucky to have lots of names that I like. And pronoun wise, they and them is great, is what I like. And salient identities, white, Ashkenazi Jew, Sicilian, middle class, Northeastern, sort of like a little bit witchy and a little bit land based, and also a parent and a single parent, and a queer trans parent. And also relevant for today, I like to knit while I'm in meetings so I can pay attention better. So just for this, a salient identity is that I'm a knitter, and that's gonna help me pay attention. And I was also gonna say like a Bluntstone type, I forgot what they were called, so thank you, Amanda, but the kind of like stylish yet very practical. The other pair of shoe, I would say, I used to own a pair of gold sequined sneakers, and I miss those a lot. And so sometimes more on the inside, I feel like that. Check. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you three for being here and for introducing yourselves. I know you're all coming from us from different places, so I really want to know. So we asked you to join this panel based on your leadership with racial justice organizing in Vermont. Can you speak to roles, positions that you've held, have held, or to some of the projects and the organizations that you've helped lead?
Should we keep the same order or?
You're welcome to go first if you'd like. I'm not a stickler for being first.
I feel good about generally going last on these, so
Okay.
whatever y'all want.
Let's just popcorn it then. Let's just.
Great.
Okay, so I'll start off then. And I think your question was, can you repeat the question actually?
Yeah, absolutely. So can you speak to some of the projects, organizations that you have helped lead?
Okay. Yeah, so right now I currently serve as president of the Windham County branch of the NAACP. The NAACP is the largest and most powerful civil rights organization in the country with over 500,000 members and branches, not only 2,000 branches across the United States, but also branches in Germany and Korea and a whole bunch of other countries as well. And so that's one leadership position that I'm actually really proud of holding, and that I think I've been able to do and make a lot of change behind. I also sit on a lot of different committees across the state, in boards. I sit on the governor's equity task force. The list goes on and on for things that I'm sitting on. But I also want to point out that I'm on the board of a co-op, which I think is pretty cool, because I'm a big land access and food access person. I really resonate with what Fisher said when they said that they were a little witchy or maybe land-based. I feel it in my soul too. So yeah, I would say that that's kind of the positions that I'm holding right now. Back in the day, I also did a lot with Palestinian Solidarity Committee back in St. Louis, and I've always been moving, y'all. I just be doing. and I'm gonna popcorn it to Amanda.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so as I previously mentioned, I do serve on the board of directors for Outright. I think you all might be a little bit familiar with that organization. And then I'm also one of the founding members of the Vermont APIDAs, that's Asian Pacific Islander Desi Americans for Black Lives. I'm also the communications and networking co-chair for the Asian Pacific American Network within ACPA, which is a student affairs higher educational professional organization. And so we work with other entity groups, including, but certainly not limited to, the Multiracial Network, Latinx Network, Pan-African Network, as well as the Indigenous Scholars Network. And I really hope I didn't mess up one of those, but it is entirely possible that I did. And so those are a few of the things that I do right now. And then also within my full-time role, I work at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. And so, excuse me, I also am on the leadership team for the Asia Pacific Islander Caucus there as well. Yeah, so I think in terms of that, all of those are at different levels, but certainly the Vermont APIDAs for Black Lives is currently probably like the biggest Vermont-based thing. And Alex?
Sure, thanks. I was like, oh, I should have written this down. I think first and foremost, because something I will be specifically talking about later is I've had the honor and the privilege to be part of the Root Social Justice Center, which is down here in Brattleboro. I'm also out of Brattleboro with Stefan. And the Root is a racial justice organization that is transitioned into being all BIPOC led. And I will talk more about that later in terms of being white and transitioning out of leadership. I was also part of Lost River Racial Justice down here, which is a predominantly white-based racial justice organizing project that is in very close alignment with the Root and NAACP and some Unsusu collective down here. So was a part of that, and Out in the Open, which is sort of maybe like in the next move after Outright when you age out, or concurrently. But Out in the Open does rural LGBTQ queer organizing, and through over the past years has really focused a lot on racial justice and other sort of justice focused organizing. And I think, the other two things I'll say quickly are I'm a representative town meeting rep down in Brattleboro, which means that I get to help decide town policy and town resource allocation, which to me is inherently a racial justice move to be a part of where and how we allocate resources, like money, but also other things like parks or roads and stuff. And then lastly, I just started in the fall. I transitioned from being self-employed to working with a worker cooperative. That means that we are all our own bosses, so we don't have hierarchy in the organization. And it is a bookkeeping cooperative out of New York. We do financial support specifically for solidarity economy organizations. So that's a lot of like grassroots and justice-oriented co-ops and nonprofits. And through that, I see my role as being a big support role by helping organizations get their money right so they can do the work they want to be doing. Thanks.
Great. You know, I can't really speak for everyone on the call, but I have a feeling I can ask this question and everyone might be thinking it, but where could you think of a time, like maybe early in your life, where you realized you were a leader? Like what helped you or who helped you come to that realization of like being a leader and taking on leadership roles? And yeah.
I can start with this one. And I think it's because my response may actually resonate with a lot of other folks in here, is that sometimes I question and I wonder if I actually currently realize that I'm a leader. I think, right, this idea of like, oh, is that something with which I identify? Because I definitely have had many leadership roles, right? I think particularly throughout middle and high school, with co and extracurricular activities of like drama, any theater folks out there, like what's up? But like drama club and orchestra and swim team and environmental club and outdoor ed and newspaper, right? Like I can list all of these things, and then in college, a number of things as well. But I don't know if I would necessarily be out here and just be like, what's up everyone, like I'm a leader. Like it feels it gives me a lot of tricky feelings, and I think a lot of those for me are wrapped up in how do we define leadership and how is leadership conventionally defined, in sort of like the normalization of like who is normalized as a leader with what qualities and what do those mean. And I know that there may be other questions that Emma might have about those in a bit. But that is sort of where like I grapple with it. And so, you know, a lot of conversations I've had with my mentors, particularly in the past few years, has been sort of like, you know, here's what we believe you hold in like leadership qualities, and sort of like, okay, like I will embody those and really think about them. So I would say that I am still realizing it. I am, you know, tapped for a number of different leadership positions, and I certainly have served in a number of them and will continue to, and take a lead and take a stance on things. But yeah, it isn't necessarily something that I have like fully grown into at this time as a sort of like answer, non-answer.
Great, I can go next. Thanks for that, like opening it up to like, I don't know, am I, you know? And I think for me that resonates also, like in certain places I feel really confident of being a leader in, like my professional work is doing finance and math and numbers. So in those things, I'm like, yeah, that's a thing. And I also was thinking about just like, for me, I find that there's an importance as a white person doing racial justice work to be aware of leadership, to be aware of the power and influence that comes with being a leader that I'm either choosing to bring into a space, or choosing, like I'm choosing and acknowledging how that is affecting people around me and affecting me and what my assumptions are. So I think there's an importance for me around like owning that, even though it can be really scary, that the not owning it means that I'm probably doing things that I'm not aware of and might not want to be doing. So just acknowledging the like power that can come with being a leader. And for me, I was like, I scribbled some things of like, working at summer camp when I was a teenager taught me about leadership, because I like did the basic job, but then also did some things like tried to solve problems that nobody else wanted to, or tried to support other coworkers in ways that was like above and beyond the job a little bit. And then the other place where I always say everything I learned about leadership and community organizing, I learned from sports. So I played rugby in college, and that taught me everything about teamwork. And I feel like leadership is inherently about teamwork, and how to be a good team player and team member. And so I think a lot about my time when I played rugby. Also, it helped prep me for like queer leadership very much as well. Check.
Well, first and foremost, rugby is cool, and since we're in the same area, I hope you teach me how to like play it at some point in time. Anyway, but I digress. So I would say, to answer that question, that it's complicated, because I think that every person who is Black and queer is a leader. I really do. Like, I'm like, if you're Black and you're queer at the same time, like you're a leader, just in my book. And so therefore I guess I would have to think of, or I've I've restored a lot of my life to tell myself that I am. And the reason why I say that is because, and I can only speak from my experiences in my community, but in the Black community, uh, queer people are at the very bottom of the caste system. So, there's gender politics, there's all that stuff, but the reality of it is that if you identify as a person who is sexually diverse, or you're marked as a person who's sexually diverse, that it can be really hard. It can be really hard for you. And you're usually minimized in ways that your peers aren't, in the within group Black community. And it doesn't really matter if you're in a femme presenting body or a male presenting body, or a body that is maybe more androgynous, or it doesn't really matter. It is what it is. And so I think that I've always found solidarity with other Black or mixed with Black queer people in that way. So I would say that what defined it for me, actually, it wasn't an actual moment. I just think it was an arc, surviving bullying, being able to stand up through that, stand up past that. I was jumped, physically, talked about, called names every day. It was very tough. And I think a lot of people like us, queer people, we go through a lot of that stuff. And I think that the act of getting up and pushing through and realizing it does get better, and being who you're going to be and standing tall in that, makes you a leader in your own right, because you already know how to walk into a room where probably half of it is going to have an opinion about you when you don't have an opinion about them, and you still do what you do and you stand strong anyway. So for me, I think that all of us are leaders, and I do think that's what would qualify me as a leader. And I would also say, and I guess to add before I wrap that question up, is that lineage. I come from a lot of strong Black people. My grandparents, my father, but also my mother, who's a Polish woman. And I identify as a Polish person as well. I mean, that's a strong identity within me. I resonate with it. I'm proud of it. So I think lineage has a lot to do with that. So when I feel like, even if I have anxiety, or I feel fear, that I conjure those ancestors and they start speaking. And sometimes I don't have to say anything, and I just let them do what they do. So I guess that's how to answer that question.
No, that's really beautiful, Stefan, the way you described that. And I really appreciate all of you kind of shifting what our perception is of leadership, what it can look like, what it can mean to individuals. So maybe with that kind of reframing of how you see leadership and what it means to you, what would you say are some leadership qualities that you embody, or maybe have learned to embody?
I can go first because I wrote things down because I was like, I'm gonna have this so much, and also wow. Okay.
I'm thinking, so that's great.
We're also, part of being a leader is knowing when to be prepared and when not to be prepared. And for me also, I get so nervous speaking in front of y'all queer youth because you're amazing and you're the future and you already are leaders. And so there's a piece of me that's like, oh, I gotta prep because I know I'm gonna get a little nervous and anxious when I'm in front of all your brilliance. So that's also, anyway, and good job me, I wrote things down. So I wrote 6 things. One is the willingness to learn and adapt. I think makes a good leader, constant ability to know that there's more for you to learn and adapt as you go. Being able to be a good active listener and synthesize the information that you hear. And that information is like feelings and strategies and criticisms or feedback, like taking all that in and then being able to synthesize. I think risk taking and creativity are a thing of, I always like to say when I'm in the front of a room, like today, I'm not here for being like better than anyone. I'm here because I'm more like I'm willing to make mistakes in front of people. And that's how I generally feel about any public speaking is like, I am willing to say things that people don't agree with or that I later am like, oof, and do that and take that risk. Um, and then I think supporting others is a huge piece of being a leader. I don't think anyone is able to do anything alone. So togetherness is so important. Um, and then like knowing who to have around you, knowing who to bring in to support you, knowing who to delegate to, and knowing who to look to. There's lots of people with lots of opinions, and it's important to sort of surround yourself with the folks that you think are gonna be the best team for you to be on. And then I think for me, lastly, I would say like a piece of awareness around when to like move forward, when to move, like what type of leadership role I should have in different situations. So for me, as a white Ashkenazi Jew, having leadership around Palestine solidarity is important when I'm working with Jewish community, or having a leadership role in white organizing for racial justice is really important. Having a support leadership role when I'm supporting my BIPOC like siblings and friends around organizing, or having a support role when I'm supporting Palestinian-led organizing is really important. And so for me, that awareness of when I should be taking on different leadership places is so helpful. Check.
Okay. I like how you say check after every time. I'm like, maybe I should start doing that. So I would say I would keep it short and simple and say that I think you should follow your intuition. I think one cool thing about being queer or on the LGBTQIA spectrum is that we develop a spidey sense. I don't know where it comes from, but we all have it. It lives in us, and I think that that can give us an advantage in some cases, because I think that we have this really beautiful ability to pick up the energy, but also like what's going on in our own bodies and how we should move based on the combination of those two. And so I guess my answer to that question would be that to listen to your intuition. And if your intuition is telling you that this is your time to step up and step out, then to do it, even if you're afraid. And if it's telling you that maybe this is a time where you could, hang back and hang out, then, you can do that too. And that's okay. And I guess I would also say to be kind. I would say that of all the success that I might have on paper or whatnot, I think being kind is the thing that has gotten me the farthest, because people might not remember what you said to them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And so if you are kind to somebody, they might not remember anything, but they might say, oh, I remember, I liked them. They were cool. So I think those are my two pieces of advice. Check.
Yeah, I just feel like, everything that Fisher said, I can be like, all right, we're good. Like that wrapped it up. But yeah, the preparation piece is definitely a thing. My preference is certainly to be more prepared for a panel, but I also, as I messaged Emma earlier, walked into my apartment like 5 minutes before I signed on, because I'm currently on vacation, and so yes, anyone is always welcome to follow up for more information in the event that I just don't make any sense. I think in terms of qualities, the biggest thing for me is that it isn't about me, like as a leader and my leadership in any organization or for any group, like it just isn't about me. And so, thanks, Dana. And so, I think one of the biggest pieces is like, how can I support others? And so as much as leadership is touted about like, oh, the skills this leader has and like all the things that they're able to do and able to take care of, I think it really is about uplifting the experiences and the skills and stories of other people, and less so about like what I'm capable of doing, because, I'm being asked to be a leader in a situation, I'm not being asked to like do all of the things. Those are two very different things. I could do all of the things, but I think that a significant part of it is how, as a leader, am I empowering others to better refine their skills and their abilities to do those same things, which is something that's, I think, very difficult, and particularly in this very individualistic sort of like self-sufficiency narrative that we exist in within, America, is this like, oh, well, if like you can do it yourself and you can take all in care of yourself. And I think that it's a difficult thing for me to grapple with also, being a child of refugees and sort of what does it mean to like grow up in this very white American, be self-sufficient, only take care of yourself mentality, but then also having been raised and coming from this idea and this like connection to community and how we take care of each other. One of the things that was recently told to me was, and I don't think it was the first time, was this idea of hire someone who's smarter than you. And I know that a lot of folks here are like, I'm not hiring anyone for a while, like that doesn't matter. But I think in general, as a leader, like surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, to have that humility and to be able to be humble as a sort of like, I have things to learn from other people as much as they supposedly have things to learn from me. And in that, right, like recognizing that the learning never stops. And so that I don't know what I don't know, and I need to be open to learn, to like learning about what are the things that I don't know. Just kind of to being open to being wrong, being open to honest feedback. And for me, certainly working on my own self-awareness and development to best to be there for other people. I reflect a lot on leadership in moments where I may not be in a specific leadership position. So in addition to working in higher education and student affairs, I spent a long time working in retail and retail management, as an example, right? And so for folks who have worked, any sort of job where it's like an entry level sort of like floor position, customer facing, right? This idea of we don't know what like management is working on. We don't know what they're doing in the back office, behind the scenes, when they're not on the floor, that sort of a thing. And so I've taken a lot of those experiences to reflect on, if and when, and then I was in one of those positions, how would I balance that, taking into consideration what it feels like to be, a so-called like measly sales associate, but to also like recognize where the skills and the talents are of folks, and to give them the opportunity to really lean into those, and to do what they truly enjoy doing and what they excel at. And if they don't, sort of like having that conversation about, okay, how can we make this something that's more enjoyable for you? So I think a lot of this also comes out when I am supervising undergraduate student employees in my role, where, when we have conversations and I say throughout the entire time that they're working, whether it's a volunteer position on a student committee that I advise, or if it's actually a paid position, where I say, if at any point this isn't enjoyable for you, you don't feel like you're getting out of this what you want and what you had hoped for, then let's have that conversation. Because this isn't just about, what you as a student are contributing to the office or this organization or this committee. It is about what are you gaining from this and how are you learning and growing out of this experience. And so my role as a leader is to make sure that everyone is feeling like they're learning and growing and they're enjoying it and not doing something because they feel like they have to. And that is coming from someone who has spent a significant amount of time taking on positions and doing things because I felt like I had to for the better of other people, even though I didn't necessarily want to do it.
Thank you all so much for that. I'm going to kind of shift gears and ask like a two-part question here for Amanda and Stefan. So the first question, and you both have kind of touched on it a little bit, but how has your experience with race or of race, let me rephrase that. How has your experience of race intertwined with your experience of leadership? But then, the other part of this question is, have there been times when your leadership has been questioned based on your identities?
You or me, you or me. Okay. So, short answer is yes. There have been quite a few times. I mentioned the NAACP earlier, which is a leadership role that I currently hold, but I also am a clinician. I'm a therapist. And so there is a lot in the research realm that I have to do, or in the clinical realm. And I have seen my identities play out, identity politics really play out in both cases. I would say within the NAACP, being that it is an older organization, that in some cases it has, I think, skewed more conservative on some issues. Not as of late, but they've had a whole lot of changes. But the culture within some of the regional or the national organization has been more conservative. And so I feel like as a queer person who was stepping up to lead a branch, that I felt a lot of that pushback. And I had to kind of push back against a lot of that pushback. And that's where I said, those ancestors and conjuring up and bringing up those people who make you strong are so important, because you will find that you will have a voice, or you will have a perspective to add to a very unnuanced conversation. And sometimes it takes strength to say it and to speak up. I would say in the other side of the house, more clinical and research-based stuff, that, it's kind of where my Blackness really starts to feel like it gets complicated, right? I'm a professor, and a lot of my students, I've had students, question my opinions, question my knowledge base, question my ability to lead. And it's not out of a place of hate or disrespect. It's just, that's what happens when you are in these roles and people are not used to seeing people who look like you or sound like you in these roles. They question the validity of what you're saying, what you have to say. So I would say yes, but I would also end that out by saying that while that is true, I think that these identities have given me so much more, and have given me, I think, like an endless well of strength to pull from, and also to build solidarity from, because I really believe that I can identify, at least in some way, or empathize in some way with almost anybody. And I think that has really, I think that if I had to do it all over again, I would be Black and queer all over again, because I wouldn't want to live through the world without those lenses. So in a way, I think that I'm, better off for it in all the ways I do, actually. And so I'm going to check, and then I'm going to pass it to Amanda.
Thanks. Yes, yeah. I mean, it's just a sort of like, yes, race and experience and leadership experience certainly intertwine. And I also was thinking about when it really started for me, and I think it started for me when I actually realized, right, was going through my own racial identity development. And so I think there is this piece of did I understand what it meant that I'm not white, and what it meant to be in leadership roles as a person of color, who's, you know, the tricky thing is, I shared this recently in a conference presentation of, being Chinese American is to hold a role and a positionality of both being the colonizer and the colonized, really depending on the context. And I think that is a really, it is a tricky sort of thing. And I think particularly because of the model, like, I'm not trying to give you all like an Asian American history lesson right now, like that can be a different day. But, to think about, the model minority myth and how Asian Americans have been so-called uplifted in a way for like racial triangulation, right, to uphold white supremacy and also anti-Blackness. And so, it took a lot of me having to learn about these things and to learn about Asian American history and to understand what role my race does play in all of this and how it is really critically important. And that the way that I am adjacent to whiteness doesn't mean that I am absolved from doing any sort of work. And so I think that is the piece that is the most complicated, is that, like, sometimes it feels like I have a choice as to whether or not I address race. I guess it's when you combine the two words. And then sometimes it definitely is not a choice. Certainly, so I'm from Seattle, and I think, and certainly not even I think, moving from Seattle to Vermont and moving to Burlington to attend UVM, not recently. I think just want to put that, it was not recently. Like, UVM wasn't in its like double digits of students of color in its population. And just distinctly remembering standing on the UVM green, staring at the Billings, what was then the Billings Student Center, and now it's the library, right? But standing there with two other people of color, and there being literally 700 white people in front of us, right? And it's just moments like that where it's race does matter, and it shouldn't, and it doesn't necessarily take the sort of culture shock of being in, depending on what statistics we're addressing, the whitest or the second whitest state in the country. But it certainly has, from then, since college and throughout college, deeply impacted my leadership experience, because of the recognition that the responsibility that I hold to dismantle anti-Blackness and to not perpetuate it, and to really leverage the areas in which I have privilege to be able to combat these things. And also recognizing where there's going to be times where I'm just emotionally drained, because it is exhausting to not see someone who looks like you for days at a time. I mean, especially during this pandemic. It's like, unless I make this concerted effort to go to this specific grocery store, or like this specific restaurant, or do these things, like, I'm not going to see someone else who looks like me. And that in itself is exhausting. And so knowing in my leadership, how do I communicate that with other people, to tell them, like, hey, I just don't have it in me today, and I'm just tired, and I need help, and I need support with this. So I think, it is a tricky thing, but it does connect back to this like communication, and also being open to learning more, and just recognizing that regardless of what is happening or how I'm feeling, like, race always impacts whatever is happening, because of this society in which we exist.
Thank you both so much. Fisher, I want to direct a question at you. We have just a couple minutes left, but you helped to shape an organization and then stepped away from the leadership role within it. Would you share a little bit more about that experience, and then how you see your role as an ally in racial justice organizing? I know it's a big question for just like a little bit of time.
Great. Can you do like a 1 minute type thing? Or do I like have 1 minute?
I will like
Yeah.
Just go, and then I'll
Yeah,
wave my hand.
great.
At you.
So the organization is the Root Social Justice Center, and about a year ago, right before the pandemic, the two white folks, myself and Angela, stepped out of being in the core organizing body, the collective. And it was wild because then it was the pandemic. And also, Angela came down with really intense cancer and was completely emotionally, in her own world for a while. So there was a lot of, I wrote down like, or remembering all of the hards of it, like it was so hard, and it still is really hard. And I just have like one joy that I wrote down because it was the thing, which is just that stepping out was clearly the right thing to do for the organization. And that to me, just like the whole list of things that were hard are like irrelevant, because, and not irrelevant to me as a human that is allowed to have feelings, but irrelevant to the decision, right? So for me, stepping out was a decision that I knew that the impacts on the organization would be what we had collectively talked about. And a lot of that was around the importance, especially in Vermont, of having an all BIPOC led organization. The power of being able to say that, and the power of it being a collectively run organization. And specifically, the Root has always been majority queer, and majority women, if not women and genderqueer trans folks led. And so it's also, there's a lot of pieces for me in that power of, for me as a white person, being able to talk to other white people and being like, yeah, I don't need to be there. Why would I need to be there? I'm going to support in other ways, but like this is possible in a way that also for me is really heartbreaking, having organized in other states where there are dozens of all BIPOC led organizing in a single city, and to in Vermont have that be a big deal in the whole state is just, it's heartbreaking, and also hopeful and exciting, and like so grateful to have been a part of that transition. Yeah, and I think for me, some of the hard things that I think are important to note, because like white people get to have feelings, it's just like where and how are we processing those? And so for me, there was a lot of grief in leaving an organization that had been my political home for 7 years, or leaving a leadership role and leaving that like meeting every week with these people that are my family and that are my friends and that are my comrades and my colleagues, and just being like, oh, I'm literally not going to see you every week. And then the pandemic, so like I'm actually just not going to see anyone. And there was a lot of grief, and it was really important for me, and has been, because I'm still working through that, to hold that, but I'm not putting it on the folks who are still leading an organization. And for folks that ask me and choose, for like my BIPOC friends that choose to engage with me on that level, we go there. But I'm not like calling them being like, hey, can I just come sit in on a meeting because I miss you, right? Like that's different than like, oh, hey, it's Friday night and we're still friends. And so like, yeah, this thing came up and I'm a little sad, and I still think it was the right thing to do. And also I'll say for me, realizing that like a lot of ego was coming up for me as a white person, like a lot of, I have found that there has also been a lot of sort of like othering in this way of, as a white person that was organizing with the Root, got seen as like a good white person, or like a leader white person, or somehow different than like other white people. And I can do as much as I can do to not internalize that. And sometimes it seeps through. And so it was like a good ego shock to be like, who am I if I don't have this role? And so that I think was another one of the like challenges. And again, all the challenges were absolutely worth the work and the vision. which is that I fully, believe and support self-determination and leadership support, and also just having safer spaces and safer organizations that like my whiteness is not present in. Yeah, I was like, this is a big question. Oh, the other thing about that is I am back in leadership a little bit there. So like these things aren't linear. There's been a lot of challenges due to the pandemic. And so I've been asked to come back in and do certain things. And that is also been really important lesson of like, time is not linear. Roles are not like cut dry, like start, stop, and then done, and a lot of it has just really for me been about relationship. And I'm also going to say bye to folks that are leaving. Yeah, and I think for me, when I think about allyship or think about co-conspiratorship or words, that I'm always behind on words because I don't always like read the newest thing. I just kind of do the things. That relationship is just key. Keeping and holding relationship, and those relationships can start from like I'm attending meetings and I'm taking notes for like 5 years before anyone, and I'm consistently showing up and building those relationships, and folks know that they can trust me and that I'm responsible and I am consistent, are some of, for me, like the most important roles to have in anti-racist organizing work. Like if you're going to be a note taker, be the best note taker. Like do an awesome job at it and be consistent and let people know that they can count on you to do that, because that means someone else doesn't have to do that and they can pay attention more. Or like, be the best at delivering CSA boxes, because that means that someone else gets to like be home with their family or do something else with their time, and be consistent. So I think those are, this is like years of things that I'm still learning and getting feedback and shifting with. And I'll say being the parent of a BIPOC teen is also teaching me a million things I didn't know. And not necessarily teaching me the things, just that I'm realizing how little, like I know as a white person. So I guess I think a lot about relationships and figuring out where is it important for your skills to shine, because you are important and you are needed. We are all needed in this work, and there is a role for you. Check.
Thank you. We are at the end. I want to do something real quick. One word whip. So if you all could give me one word of what you hope to create within your community and communities throughout Vermont. And whoever wants to start us off before we wrap up this panel and say thank you so much to all of you.
Transcendence.
Like shared resources.
Room to breathe.
I love it. You all, thank you so much for taking your time and going a little bit over and still spending the time with us. Folks on here, if you just want to drop your love in the chat for these panelists, thank you again so much for joining us. Also for folks on this call, the evaluation link has also been in the chat. If you could please fill that out, let us know how today went for you all. And, I guess without further ado, for our panelists, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. I hope you're reading the love in the chat. We're gonna wrap this up, so everyone can unmute and say goodbye. Have a great rest of your day.
It was a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.